So we know that Starfield is going to be a 30 frames per second game on Xbox Series consoles. But could introduction of FSR 3 change that? Could we get 60 FPS in Starfield on consoles? Let's look into this. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So let's talk about Starfield and frame rates and FSR 3. So I'm sure you heard about this technology already. I made a video a couple of days ago about it. AMD has officially confirmed that FSR 3 is coming to Xbox. We still don't know when exactly, because all they said was Q4, or actually they did say fall of this year, so this may be September, October, November, who knows, right? We don't have the exact date, and that's true for both Xbox and consoles. Now, Xbox and PC, sorry. Now, obviously there's a ton of rumors suggesting that this may be September and maybe later, etc, etc. But we still don't know officially, right? Okay, I just wanted to say that before anyone will attack me that I'm, basically telling lies, right? Date, we don't know when, okay? So without out of the way, let's talk about some, I guess, leaks. Because really all this talk about Starfield, FSR 3 that I'll be talking about today, it's all based on leaks, because like I said, Starfield has not been officially confirmed to be using FSR 3, and like I said, Starfield is actually launching really tomorrow when it comes to early access, and yeah, don't expect FSR 3 to be used in that game like day one, even on 6th of September when the game actually officially launches, because yeah, AMD has not implemented that even on PC. Okay, so with that out of the way, is it possible actually for FSR 3 to make its way to Starfield, and would that actually work? Okay, so first off, that leak suggesting that Starfield could potentially get FSR 3, that comes from Moore's Law, I think. He was the one who said that he heard rumors. Actually, he heard from graphics manufacturers partners that Starfield would be one of the games that is going to get support for it. And you know what? That makes sense, right? Like, it doesn't require a rocket science knowledge to actually kind of figure this out. It just kind of makes sense. It's going to be a very demanding game, so FSR 3 and more frames thanks to it would actually makes a lot of sense. And also it makes sense for Starfield due to the type of game it is, right? It's going to be more about exploration. It's going to be rather slower paced kind of game. It's not going to be, Call of Duty or Apex, where like every bit of seconds or millisecond actually counts, right? Now, obviously, FSR 3 is a great technology. I mean, at least on paper, because like I said, it's not out there yet. Nobody actually tested it just yet. It looks good in motion because Digital Foundry did see a couple of demos already. So they say when it comes to, visual quality, it works well. It looks good. I'm sure there's going to be some artifacting, but looks like it's not really going to be a big of an issue. But really, the one big potential issue is the latency, right? So, the input lag and that kind of stuff. So that's what you don't want to have in your game. So obviously for Starfield, like I said, Starfield being more like exploration, slower pace kind of game, FSR 3 could potentially actually work, right? And but there's two things really we need to discuss. So even though it makes sense for Starfield and we're not getting FSR 3 day one for Starfield, that's for sure, that's confirmed, we may get a patch later, because that's what usually happens with these games. Even when you go back to previous versions of FSR from AMD, they would and that's true for both PC and Xbox, and they did introduce FSR 3 with new games, so games that would be coming after launch of that technology, they would get the technology. But that was also true for games that released prior to that, because some developers would put some extra work and introduce FSR2. Now, for those of you, because I've seen a number of comments in my videos, in my previous video, talking about the fact that FSR is not going to help consoles because it's never going to get to consoles. It's not going to be used by developers because even FSR2 is not being used by developers. And that's a lie. Just Google it, dude. Basically, and that wasn't only one guy that was saying that. I've seen a number of comments like that. There's a number of games that uses FSR2, and they introduced FSR2 after releasing the game, right? And we're talking about a number of games like Cyberpunk 2077 uses that, Witcher 3 is using FSR2, Dying Light 2 is using FSR2, probably half of games released recently is using that technology too. From what I'm hearing, FSR2 is being used for Immortals of Avon, right? I mean, these are just few titles that are using it, and we're talking about like both older titles like Cyberpunk. I mean, it's not necessarily old per se, but Witcher 3 is older too, and they introduced it. So, you know, all these comments that say, oh, FSR 3 will never be used on consoles because even FSR 2 is not being used, you know, they are just lies. They are fake. You are either lying or, you know, you're not informed well. So, I don't know. Start using Google maybe before you comment. So with that out of the way, now we know that FSR2 is being used on consoles, not only Xbox but PlayStation 2. So now we can talk about FSR3 because FSR3 builds on FSR2. So it makes sense for, I guess, because the thing is that in order to use FSR3, you need to have FSR2 implemented. And not necessarily that you have to implement FSR2 first, then wait a little bit and then implement FSR3. It can be all done in one patch. But what I'm saying is that if a game has got FSR2 implemented already, it's probably going to be easier for developers to implement FSR3, right? Because, you know, FSR2 is actually part of the package when it comes to FSR3 technology. And when it comes to Starfield, guys, hey, that's another game that will be using FSR2 on both Xbox and PC, right? So that's confirmed. So there you go, guys. Another game that is using FSR2. So I guess I'm not saying that it's going to be easy to implement FSR3, but that's probably going to be easier because FSR2 is there already. And now, so with that out of the way, let's talk about some, I guess, not so good news when it comes to Starfield potentially being 60 frames per second game. Okay, so first off, we don't know when FSR3 will launch officially, right? You know, it's probably this year, but who knows? Like these early leaks suggest September, but that's just a leak. We don't know that. So it may be September, maybe October. And that means that even if Starfield was to get that patch after launch, that's probably going to be at least a month, maybe 2, maybe 3 after the launch, right? So that's not great because a lot of people will be playing the game right now. So we would all love to experience that game in 60 frames per second at launch. Like first impression counts, right? And it's cool that we're probably going to get that patch later, but hey, a lot of people will beat that game by that and by then. And of course, I know that this game is going to be huge. The people will be playing this game for years, and so they will benefit of that technology anyway. But hey, in my opinion, that's a little bit too late. It's a shame that maybe AMD didn't, or maybe Bethesda didn't put some extra effort in implementing that a little bit earlier as an maybe as an experimental feature, who knows, right? But anyway, it is what it is. So we know that Starfield is not going to be getting FSR 3 at launch. So now we know that for sure. So at launch, this is still going to be a 30 frames per second locked game on consoles. On PC, it's a different story because, you know, it all depends on your specs. So that's one worry. Now another issue is that this technology obviously introduces lag, because basically with FSR 3, what AMD is doing, or what game engine is doing with that technology implemented, it actually creates fake frames, right? But you know, the thing is that it takes time to compute these frames, and it introduces lag and whatever, right? Meaning that, you know, the game may actually be more fluent, is that the word? Nice and smooth when it comes to frames, may actually look better when it comes to frames, because yes, 60 frames per second games actually do look better because of lack of motion blur, or not lack of it, but not needing motion blur, and there's no judder, but it introduces lag, so it may look and kind of play nice on the screen, but it may feel a little bit laggy, so we don't really want that. And the problem with this technology apparently is that AMD is suggesting 60 frames per second base for frame generation, extra frame generation technology to be base, right? So they say, okay, so you want to use FSR and you want to have best experience with it. So you want to have both frames and good, you know, good kind of feel for the game. Well, you better run the game at 60 frames per second, and then, you know, take advantage of 120 frames per second, 120 hertz monitor, for example, right? While Starfield is 30 on consoles. So the question is it still going to work? I mean, yes, it will work, because AMD doesn't say that you can't use FSR with 30 frames per second games, but the lag may be a bit of an issue, more of an issue than in a 60 frames per second game, if you know what I mean, right? So obviously AMD has their own other technologies like anti-lag technology and that kind of stuff. So that should help a little bit still. And another thing is that Starfield is not necessarily a fast-paced shooter. So I guess that technology could be a problem running from a 30 frames per second game base and pushing that to 60 when it comes to like fast-paced shooters, right? Like FPS, like Call of Duty or Apex, whatever. I mean, these games are 60 anyway, so that's not a problem. I'm just talking about the fact that imagine. Okay, let's talk about Redfall. And Redfall is not necessarily a fast-paced shooter too, but it's more of a shooter, right? I mean, yeah, so it may not necessarily work best for Redfall, for example, because it's a 30 frames per second game, and it's a shooter. And yeah, Starfield has shooting mechanics and everything too, but I guess like most of the time you will be exploring. So hopefully that's not really going to be much of an issue. So I'm not saying that it's a, you know, deal breaker that 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second recommendation for a base game from AMD is a game breaker, and that means that it's not going to happen. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, for best experience, it's best to have a 60 frames per second game, and then, you know, I don't know how you call it, upscale it, or upframe it to 120 or more. And that's what AMD has been showing, like games running at 40 or whatever or more frames and what have you. The good thing is that I guess Todd Howard did say that even on the Xbox, that game was running sometimes even close to 60. So maybe if they were to unlock that internally and then implement FSR 3, that means that the game would not necessarily be locked to 30 internally in that mode. The FSR 3 would be more efficient, I guess. So that's, I guess, some hope for it. So anyway, guys, but this is all still all theory, because FSR 3 is still not out yet. Starfield is not still out yet. We know that Starfield is going to be locked to 30 frames per second at launch. I just hope that FSR 3 will be introduced to this game, in this game after the launch with an update. I'm really looking forward to it. I'll be checking this out on PC, because I bet that Starfield will get that patch, at least on PC, and I bet it will be on consoles too. So anyway, guys, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about it. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.